Blue Lock is a show about strikers, and so in today's video we are counting down my top picks for the best defenders in the show. Because hey, what are strikers without strong defenders to oppose them? And so without any further ado, coming up at number 10 we have a three-way tie between Isagi, Kaiser and Shido. And immediately I know what you're saying. What? You're having insane strikers in your top 10 defenders? Well, you see, Blue Lock is such a crazy show that these strikers are better in defending than 99% of the defenders we've seen in the show. I mean, in the NEL it was complete craziness because these strikers were better at defending than the defenders of their own teams, which I don't know, it is something that always bugged me, but it is what it is. However, how do they do that? How do these strikers pull off these amazing defending feats? Well, you see, what they do is very simple, but at the same time it is very effective. Because all three have insane field readability and perception. All they do is simply run to the most optimal spot for the opposing team and try and block the shot of their striker. However, don't let this fool you, because as I said, this is so effective that these strikers render their defenders completely useless. However, I gotta say that Kaiser and Shido are slightly better than Isagi in this regard. You see, all of them can read the field impeccably for sure. However, I feel like Isagi lacks the physicality and the dueling ability that would put him on Kaiser and Shido's level. And this is despite how much he improved it during the NEL. However, the reason I included him still is because he controls the field better than both, and in a lot of instances that level of control gives him slightly better field readability, and thus he can predict the most optimal spot slightly faster than Kaiser and Shido, completely equalizing the score and sharing with them the last spot on our list today. However, coming up at number 9 we have another tie, but this time it is between two players, Rin and Nico. Now you have to understand, what Rin and Nico do is actually the same as Kaiser, Shido and Isagi. All these 5 players do is run to the most optimal spot and try to stop the striker from shooting there. However, the reason I consider both Nico and Rin slightly better is actually rather simple. First, I feel like Nico is just another Isagi. However, because I feel like he dedicated his whole playing style for defending, I think he deserves to be slightly higher. At the same time, Rin's insane physicality and his berserker state give him an insane dueling ability, which means after reaching the most perfect position, Rin actually has a higher chance at stopping the striker than Kaiser, Shido and Isagi. And so for that reason, I definitely think that both Rin and Nico deserve to be higher than Shido, Isagi and Kaiser. However, you have to understand, it is not by a large margin, and all of these 5 players are still relative to each other in terms of defending. Which is kinda crazy because Nico is competing with 4 strikers in terms of defending, and I don't know if that's a good look for our favorite hentai boy. However, that's the 9th spot for you. But then at number 8 we have Reo Mikage. Now once more, Reo is much like Nico, Rin, Isagi, Shido and Kaiser. He relies on his metavision and his ability to read the field in order to have perfect positioning. However, I feel like the reason why Reo is definitely better than the other 5 is because of his insane physicality. His well-roundedness allow him to do more once he reaches the most optimal spot. And at the same time, because he is well-rounded, it is really hard to find his weakness. Maybe I would say it is his mentality, but ever since Nagi left Blue Lock, Reo has honestly been doing just fine. Reo has been very calm, collected, and most importantly, very rational in his decisions. And so I feel like it's hard to find any weakness of his. But actually, that's not all with Reo, because his ability to copy other defenders, I feel like he gives him a huge edge compared to the other players before him. And in all honesty, he definitely has what makes the perfect defender. However, the only reason he is not higher on this list is because he is way too focused on being a striker. As we've seen recently, he doesn't care that much about defending. And so compared to other players who do much more in defending, I feel like Reo is definitely lacking. And so the 8th spot fits him perfectly. However, coming up at number 7, we have another tie between Kunigami and Prince. Now this is the area of where sheer physical dominance and sheer dueling dominance gives you very high stats in defending. Like we've seen with Kunigami, he is the perfect marksman, and also he works beautifully as an anchor for the team, meaning in terms of defending, Kunigami is one of the most reliable players for one-on-ones in the entirety of Blue Lock. As for Prince, I feel like even though he is way too focused on being a striker, just his sheer dominance over the physical aspect would grant him this position, no doubt. I mean, the guy is quite literally a powerhouse. And honestly, if it wasn't for his weakness, I would have put him much higher. Because you see, Prince is the complete opposite of the likes of Isagi, Kazura and Shido. And that's all because his perception is rather low for his position. You see, being tricked like that by Otoya is definitely not a good look. However, when it comes to one-on-one duels, and when it comes to stopping players with sheer force, no one, and I mean no one, beats Chris Prince. And so for that reason, I had to include him in this list. I felt like number 7 is perfect for him, same with Kunigami. At number 6, however, we have yet another tie between Reo and Obo, the defender of Nigeria. Now these two are honestly kinda similar, because they are the most dominant forces in the air without any question. I mean, we all know about Reo's greatness in the air, but Obo also proved that he is a flying king, where he completely dominated the likes of Rin and Bachiro when the ball was high in the air. And even still on the ground, he actually stopped Rin once. Now I understand that that's not really a huge feat considering that Rin is not going all out and he really wasn't serious about the game. However, it is still a feat against Rin on the ground, and so we take those. As for Reo, as I said, you all know about his greatness. He single-handedly pocketed Kunigami for the entirety of the game. He rendered a powerhouse like Kunigami completely useless in the front lines. And with Reo, it's not just his jumping ability, but rather it is also his insane reach due to his abnormally long limbs. And so for that reason, and because they are the kings of the skies, I feel like they definitely beat the likes of Kunigami, Reo and Rin. And so being 6th on the list definitely fit them. However, at number 5, we have the Crow Father himself, Karasu Tabito. Now before, I definitely would have put Karasu on Rin, Nico and maybe Reo's level, because of his insane field readability, his dueling ability and overall his intelligence. Karasu is one of the best defensive midfielders in the show. However, after his awakening in the last game, Karasu improved insanely. We've seen the guy keep up with Loki with sheer field readability. Like, that's a very huge feat, and I understand the bulk of his evolution came in his playmaking abilities. However, as I just said, he stopped Loki once with the help of Chigiri, and later on he was able to keep up with his footsteps. And I mean, doing it for the fastest player in the show, that's definitely something. And so Karasu definitely deserves to be 5th on the list. And honestly, if the players ahead of him weren't insanely broken in terms of defending, he would have definitely made it higher. Speaking of which, at number 4, we have what I like to call the perfect defender in the show, Oliver motherfrickin' Aiku. Now think about Aiku as Reo, who is focused on defending. The guy quite literally can do it all. He can duel with the likes of Rin on the ground, and he can dominate a lot of players in the air. At the same time, his ego is very huge, he has an insane perception and field readability, and he is focused a lot on being a defender. And so from all of this, I've always felt as if Aiku is definitely the perfect defender in the show. But this actually sparks a question. If Aiku is the perfect defender, what would actually beat perfection? Well, much like it happened in his only matchup on the channel, in Blue Lock, anomaly always beats perfection. And in the case of the following players, they all are extreme anomalies at what they do. And so at number 3, we have another tie between two pros this time, Snuffy and Noel Noah. Now, to be honest, they are both this high because of their field readability. No one reads the field better than these two in the entirety of the show, with the exception being maybe Hugo. However, what's interesting is that they both do it in completely different ways. Snuffy dominates the field and sees everything before everyone, and so it is very easy for him to stop a lot of attacks. And at the same time, he excels in the air, and thus he has another strong point. However, Noah on the other hand, his vision is completely rational. He doesn't dominate the field nor even understand it. He just instinctively knows what's the most rational path to take. And when you couple this with his insane physicality, his ambidexterity, and his absurd dueling ability, you get a player that is akin to a castle. He is almost impossible to escape. I mean, even a crazy player like Levi, one of, if not the best dribblers in the entirety of the realm of Blue Lock, was not able to crack Noah's rationality without the help of Isagi. And so I feel like his vision and his insane physicality would grant him a level of defending similar to Snuffy, who completely controls the field. And I understand, you might say if they are this absurd, why aren't they ranked number 1? Well, we will find out soon enough, because coming up at number 2 we have the child prodigy himself, Julian Loki. Now before, I only considered Loki broken in defending because of his speed. The guy's range and reach is insane, because much like Isagi figured out the hard way, you can't really pass the ball casually when Loki is around. And then Loki simply goes and does the best defensive feat in the entirety of the show. There is stopping the Kaiser impact from a far away position, which honestly is just absurd. It is insanity level of defending. However, as chapter 340 revealed, being fast is not everything there is to Loki, because you see he has an above average field readability as well. The guy was able to read Japan's new pattern without breaking a sweat. And so in all honesty, he is the most busted guy in the entirety of the show, both on offense and on defense. However, that's exactly why he doesn't take the number 1 spot on today's list. It is because he is way focused on being a striker rather than actually trying to be a defender, and so he can never sell his soul for defending. Rather, much like Isagi, he does it for striking. However, this is not a problem for the first place on today's list, which is actually a tie between two different players, which are Lorenzo and Hugo. Now here's the thing, in terms of field readability and perception, both players are absurd. One does it obviously through metavision and the other does it because he is a genius like that. And in this case, the genius's strong point is actually in his field readability and perception. However, that's not all, because both actually dominate two insanely important areas when it comes to defending. For Hugo, it is the level of control he has over the field. And through this, he can stop a lot of attacks before they build momentum. He can quite literally kill them in the crib. But on the other hand, defensively speaking, Lorenzo is the best duelist in the entirety of the show, with the exception maybe being Noah and Prince. However, unlike Prince, he doesn't have that glaring weakness, and unlike Noah, he is totally focused on defending. And so for that reason, much like Hugo, I really think he deserves to be number 1. And actually, I have to say this so you guys don't wonder about it too much, because from the recent feats, it seems that Hugo is better than Lorenzo in terms of defending. I mean, stopping Rin in the air, completely dominating a lot of players when it comes to dueling, and at the same time controlling the field like none other. However, you have to remember what Lorenzo actually did. The guy quite literally pocketed Kaiser as if he was nothing. This is one of the best strikers in the entirety of Blue Lock, and Lorenzo was able to pocket him just like that. And so for that reason, I feel like the feats actually even out. And as I said, they both deserve to be at the number 1 spot. However, that's the list for you guys. I really hope you enjoyed this quick video, and until next time, thank you for watching.